Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Triangulation is brought to you by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Triangulation, episode 328, recorded January 5th, 2018. Larry Sanger. This episode of Triangulation is brought to you by LegalZoom. Get your dream business up and running or take control of your family's future with LegalZoom. For special savings, visit LegalZoom.com and enter Triangulation at checkout. Welcome to Triangulation. This is the show where we talk to the most interesting people in technology. Today, my guest is Dr. Larry Sanger. He is the CIO of Everipedia and the co-founder of Wikipedia, who's also the founder of Citizendium. And that is a tool that uses blockchain to catalog the world's best knowledge. Welcome to the show, Dr. Sanger.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. Wikipedia, you were one of the co-founders. Tell us a little bit about what inspired you. I know Newpedia came a little bit before that, and you were the editor-in-chief of Newpedia. Talk a little bit about the beginnings of Wikipedia.
Sure. Well, basically, I was wrapping up a website that I had been working on about the millennium bug, the Y2K problem. And I was going to repurpose that. And I sent out a little proposal to different acquaintances and friends of mine, one of whom was Jimmy Wales. And he replied totally out of the blue saying, "Don't work on that. Why don't you come and work on this new website that I want to start." We're calling it Newpedia, N-U-pedia, and it will basically use open source principles, applying it to content development instead of software development. And we will create the world's first free encyclopedia. And I thought that sounded awesome. And, not being married at the time, I could just pick up and go across the country, and I did that same, within a couple of weeks. I was driving out to San Diego, and our first version of the site, Newpedia, was very slow. We only produced a few dozen articles in a time, and the reason for that is that we were essentially trying to secure high quality for articles. This is something that Jimmy Wales and I agreed on from the beginning. We wanted really to make this a credible encyclopedia, and to secure the high quality, we were going to have this long process, and we thought that people would just go through it. But they didn't want to go through an 8-step process or a 7-step process. So by the summer, we had already were well agreed that, due to our testing of the concept by email, we needed to come up with an easier way for people to submit new articles, at the very least. And so I proposed a lot of different things, and even very lightweight mechanisms. But Jimmy Wales, the CEO of the company that started this, called Bombus.com, he rejected the ideas because that would entail hiring more programmers, which he just didn't want to do, didn't think it should be necessary. Probably mostly because Newpedia was not making any money, and it wasn't likely to make money for a while. So after, again, several months of casting around, I had dinner with a friend of mine, Ben Kovitz, who told me about wikis and how he had been wasting a bunch of time on it, talking to people and co-editing pages. And the whole idea sounded crazy as it did at the time, and still does to some people. the notion that anyone could edit a page, and so they could couldn't they just erase all the content? Yes, but then it's very easy for people to restore the content and so forth, and it works. So I immediately thought we could use this tool for the problem that we're trying to solve with Nupedia, and so that became basically Wikipedia. The reason it wasn't just Nupedia is that the Nupedia Advisory Board, which was just all of the PhD editors who were overseeing Nupedia, they just didn't want to have anything to do with something that would allow hoi polloi to just get on board and start mucking things up. And the whole idea sounded absolutely absurd to them. And Jimmy Wales initially also, although he was perfectly willing to install the software, he was quite skeptical at first as well. But so we decided we still want to try this, and so we'll just create a new website for a new data stream. It wouldn't be branded as part of Nupedia. So I came up with the name Wikipedia. And we launched it on July 15th, just a couple of weeks after we had the idea. And
so that was the year 2000 or 2001?
Year 2001. So it's like almost 1 year after I had started working on Nupedia. So, and it was, we had a ready-made, highly motivated community. A lot of people who wanted to work on an encyclopedia, and the whole idea of building one on a wiki was really kind of cool. People really liked the idea, and at least a lot of the people who were involved in Nupedia. And so we got a lot of early adopters, a few dozen right away, I guess. And that was enough to actually start creating content. And what happened was, basically, we were the first encyclopedia articles online for a lot of topics in the early months. And so a virtuous cycle developed between Wikipedia and Google, so that we would write a bunch of articles on these new topics that Google didn't have any encyclopedia pages about. And then people who were looking for those topics would click on, they'd just jump to the top or near the top anyway of the Google search, and then we knew when the Google bot had hit the site. It wasn't going all the time back then. It was once a month, and after the results of the Google bot hitting us hit Google, we got a spike in traffic, and then and so more people got involved that way. And they wrote more articles. And so it's just month after month, it would just go up and up and up like that until we had 20,000 articles after the first year, which sounds like not very much now, obviously, but it seemed like a whole lot back then, especially for something that basically something like this hadn't really been done before.
So did you work with anyone at Google, or did you were you friendly with people at Google? Did you know a little bit about how their algorithm worked? I mean, it seemed like a perfect storm. Wikipedia had everything that the Google algorithm wanted to raise your stuff to the top.
I think people were mostly just looking for encyclopedia articles. That's what I've always thought. And it really helps the SEO, I think, basically to say. Have the name of the article of the topic and then encyclopedia article, because people look at that and they say, oh, that's exactly what I want. I want just a basic explanation of what is known about the topic. But no, we had absolutely no contact with Google. They were already too big and important to deal with us even back in 2001. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then, I mean, your articles were sourced, of course, with, professional, valid sources, so that probably did,
Oh, they weren't? No, they weren't. I mean, back in 2001, of course
they weren't? There weren't sources in Wikipedia back then?
No, there were a few. There were people who actually cared about those things, but for the most part, no. I mean, at the beginning, it was a very silly kind of project, and it became a lot more serious. I'm really referring mostly, I suppose, to the first 6 months or so. But then we started realizing, in just gradually, I and others, obviously, decided we needed to increase the standards. It actually began in the beginning. There were a lot of people who didn't even want it to be just an encyclopedia. They just thought, well, okay, this is a wiki. It can be anything we want, right? And so they started putting summaries of books, for example, or dictionary definitions. So I had to create a page called What Wikipedia Is Not, for example. And that's still around today. So the notion that every assertion made on Wikipedia must have a source, which is, by the way, something I don't actually agree with, that didn't really, I mean, I think we saw the beginnings of that toward the end of 2001, the first year, but it didn't really become like official policy for a couple of years after that, maybe.
Well, of course, Wikipedia has had a long list of rules, one of the rules being ignore all rules, which you were championed in the beginning, but then had a bit of a change of heart. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. I still like the ignore all rules rule, and so to speak. It's tongue-in-cheek to call it a rule, obviously. I think, just by the way, I know we'll get to this, but Everipedia seems to have this spirit, is carrying on the torch very well. So they haven't even added a lot of rules yet. And they haven't really needed them. But nevertheless, they write a lot of good articles. I think Wikipedia has way too many rules. But in the beginning, anyway, we just wanted we wanted people to be motivated and feel emboldened. So another thing I came up with was that be bold in updating pages. That because there a lot of people were just shy about putting themselves out there and presuming to state what is known about a subject. And I was just constantly telling people, no, it's okay, go and do it, just write. So that's sort of the spirit behind, ignore all rules. But the problem was that after we had been after a couple of different groups of geeks from Slashdot, which was the big geek group blog at the time. I mean, they're still around, but don't have as much influence anymore. We were slashed out a couple of times in the middle of 2001, and that just changed the dynamics of the site quite a bit. And a lot of the people who showed up were more of what I would call anarchists. They really wanted to push the limits, and they did so in a very bold, is putting it nicely, way. So in the end, I came to say, well, actually, yeah, there are some things that kind of have to be off limits. You can't just just state your own personal opinion about things. There were some people who were going in and they were making up new topics and writing whole articles about them, about which apparently they were the world's sole experts about it because they made it up, that kind of thing. So
better to know the rules before you break the rules. That's what my dad always said.
Yeah, pretty much. Or at least use common sense, really. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you say push the limits, you're talking about making up content that didn't exist, but not. I mean, was there back then? Was there a lot
more
of
than that?
Was there a lot of just like, I'm going to, make up fake stuff, change articles just to see how quickly they get changed back, like just testing the limits in that way?
Yeah, there was some of that, absolutely. And then there were people who would put like really blatantly biased stuff, really ideologically charged stuff into articles, and just ignoring the neutrality policy, which was another one of the early policies, actually began life on Newpedia. Not just that. They would put comments inside the articles themselves sometimes, and those would have to be put onto the talk pages. And some of it was, relatively easy to deal with. But then there's other people who, if you have a completely wide open system, it really emboldens a certain kind of person who is not entirely stable. And that, if those people, put in hours, as some of them seem to have on the site, it can really make things unpleasant for other people who just want to write a bunch of great encyclopedia articles. So,
I mean, that's the problem with a lot of social media at this point. I mean, that's Twitter's problem as well, to some extent.
Yeah. I mean, see, I don't really think of Twitter as being a resource for reference and knowledge. It's a communication medium. I mean, I draw a fairly clear distinction between two different purposes of the internet. There's communication on the one hand, and there's information on the other. Communication involves at least two people, and it's can be used for getting and imparting information, but mostly it involves an exchange of ideas between people back and forth, an exchange of information that goes in two ways. And information, well, that can be all one way. It could be human beings don't even really need to be involved.
So, well, I mean, I agree with you, and I think, we're about the same age. But there's a whole other generation that I worry doesn't feel that way. There's all kinds of things on Twitter that are blatantly false, and that people will just accept as truth. I mean, there was the famous, I think, I don't remember what it was celebrating, but it was a tweet about how all the lights in the Eiffel Tower went off, or they turned blue or something. It was just completely false. And it got spread out everywhere, retweeted, and I mean, mostly because people just think, they're attracted to the idea of that, isn't that great that the Eiffel Tower was celebrating New Year's Eve or something, and it's so easy to just retweet something. So I do think that, do you agree that there's sort of a changing idea of what knowledge is versus just casual communication like Twitter?
I think people, when they use social media, they don't care so much about the quality of information. They're not seeking to prove what is known or what you're not constructing a logical proof. You're not marshaling evidence for a scientific theory. And the purpose is to get upvotes, and it appeals more to the emotional and narcissistic parts of our personality than our cognitive parts. And so it's I think what people do is they judge social media as an information resource, if there's anything to be regretted along those lines, it's that people don't do any more than that. In other words, they just stop, and they repeat as if they really believed all kinds of stuff that hasn't been proven properly at all. So, I mean, yes, I absolutely agree that's a problem. So, yeah.
So you famously left Wikipedia. You were quoted as saying the inmates are running the asylum. It's no secret that you were upset about what was going on there. Can you talk a little bit about when you left, why you left, and what you did next? So
the first reason I left is that they basically lost the ability to pay me. The internet bubble burst just as Wikipedia was starting to take off, but it wasn't big enough to, especially in the diminished market for ads, it wasn't enough to pay my way. So I was like the last of the new hires to be laid off around February 2002. I sort of hung around a little bit occasionally, and I guess it was the summer or fall of 2002, I started talking about just the fact that a lot of Wikipedia articles were of lower quality, and that there wasn't a lot of the newer people on the site had scared off a lot of the better people, like the people who started with Nupedia. And by better, I mean more knowledgeable, people who had actually studied what they were writing about for years, that kind of thing. I thought these were problems, and I thought one way to solve that problem would have been to basically create a side project that would label versions of articles as being expert approved. It wouldn't even have to touch the contents of Wikipedia. Maybe it could. That was one suggestion. And this is actually an idea I had in the first year. I mean, we'd been talking about it, but people were always going, I don't really like that very much. And then when push came to shove, I really discovered there's actually, unfortunately, little support among the people who were left on Wikipedia in the middle. And actually it was then for me when it really came down to a decision, and it was a decision that ultimately had to be made by Jimmy Wales, whether we were going to actually actively try to court the world's experts, the people who are most qualified to write encyclopedia articles. And I made an ultimatum. Basically, I said, I've just been donating my time lately just talking about these things. And I'm just going to completely divorce myself from this project altogether if you don't do two things. You need to do something to make the experts of the world feel more comfortable in Wikipedia, and you had to do something to basically clamp down on the bad actors, because that was when the inmates were really taking over the asylum, as I said. And Jimmy Wales basically denied, delusionally, as far as I'm concerned, that there was any problem. So I followed through, and I haven't had anything to do with Wikipedia since.
And so in 2007, you launched Citizendium.
Citizendium. It's
Citizendium.
a terrible name. Yes.
Citizendium.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Citizendium, yes.
And what was that? Tell us about that.
So Citizendium was very similar to Wikipedia, a little bit too similar. That's probably why it never really took off. But it's still going. It's got 20,000 articles now. And it's, or something like that. The differences with Wikipedia, however, are that it does have an article approval mechanism. So articles can be approved by experts within the system, and therefore we actually do allow people to apply to become editors, expert editors of and only they are actually able to approve articles. That's one thing. Another is that there is a charter which actually requires basically decent behavior out of people and commitment to certain shared principles. And then a third, at least as important as the other two, is that we require real names. So unlike Wikipedia, you couldn't contribute unless you used your real name. You couldn't contribute anonymously. So it actually had an enormous launch, actually. We got awesome publicity toward the end of 2006, and then when we actually did the public launch, which is the spring of 2007, I guess. And it looked like it was going places. At first, we started out as a fork of Wikipedia, and then we decided to unfork because it's like too many of the bad habits of Wikipedia seem to be replicated in the context of Citizendium. Interestingly, I don't think that Everipedia has quite had that same problem. But it's just a different generation. It's interesting. So but it kind of petered out after a couple of years. It's still going, and I still I can't be thankful enough to the people who are still working on it. Not that I'm making any money off it. It's always a nonprofit.
But so what why would you recommend people go there now? What would they find that they wouldn't find at Wikipedia or Everipedia? Citizendium has a number of quite good articles, and they aren't found elsewhere. They are different. It's the coverage of basic topics is actually okay. It's not that bad. Still lots of gaps even on basic topics, but there's again, you will find expert approved articles. And the quality of writing tends to be quite a bit better, in my opinion. So, at least again on the approved articles. Well, you're now the CIO of Everipedia. You recently joined them, and I want to spend the rest of our time together talking about what you're doing, how it works. But first, I need to take a moment to thank our sponsor, LegalZoom. It's the beginning of the new year. It's a new you. You can do all kinds of things to complete your resolution. If your resolution is to maybe get your estate in order for your family, or maybe you want to start a new business and you don't want to deal with all the legal stuff, LegalZoom can help. You can make this year the one that you finally get serious about launching and running your business. You can rest a little easier knowing your family's future is squared away with the right estate plan. LegalZoom has been helping people like you take care of their dreams and responsibilities for more than 16 years. You can make this year memorable. Let all the distractions of the legal stuff get out of the way. Use LegalZoom. Whether you want to take your business to the next level or take control of your family's future with an estate plan, LegalZoom plugs right into your life so you can take care of the things that matter most. They are not a law firm, but they have resources that keep you on the right path, including advice from their network of independent attorneys. Get off to a strong start in 2018 at LegalZoom.com. You can do that today, and you'll get special savings when you enter Triangulation at checkout. That's Triangulation for special savings at LegalZoom.com. LegalZoom, where life meets legal. I am talking to Dr. Larry Sanger, who is the co-founder of Wikipedia and is the CIO of Everipedia. And Everipedia is using blockchain to catalog the world's knowledge. Tell us about how Everipedia works.
Everipedia is so I love this site, and I wouldn't be part of it if I didn't. The huge difference between Everipedia, there's actually two of them between Everipedia and Wikipedia. The first is it's truly the encyclopedia of everything. You can make articles if you wanted to about every city, street, every business, every person in the world. I made an article about my left thumb just to show that I could. And so there is no notability policy on Everipedia. The consequences of that are surprisingly profound, actually. It really changes the nature of what is going on. And I wouldn't have guessed this at first, but I think it changes it for the better. I don't think it's anything that we ever really seriously considered on Wikipedia. I don't think we ever really seriously considered the idea of just letting people make articles about anything, as long as they were encyclopedia articles. They have to be encyclopedia articles, but they literally, the topic is open. It basically means that you can go in and catalog your knowledge and wisdom about all kinds of different things that Wikipedia is simply closed to. Anyway, another thing is that it is much better designed, and Wikipedia uses the name of the software is MediaWiki. So all kinds of wikis that you see today that are sort of based on the Wikipedia model that we developed also use the same software called MediaWiki. But it's written in PHP, which is kind of an old-fashioned, clunky language. No offense to coders out there. And it's the way that it's designed is very reminiscent of that era, and it hasn't changed much, not really. The mobile design is an improvement, but if you just go to the site, it really doesn't look that different than it did like 10 or even 15 years ago. And so they've made first of all, Everipedia is a fork of Wikipedia. And so you can go in and you can edit any article that is on Wikipedia on Everipedia, which is pretty liberating for people who have been sort of struggling to deal with the community on Wikipedia, which can sometimes be very, very close-knit and maybe insular, difficult to deal with, very prickly, very persnickety. Everipedia is not like that at all. It's a younger crowd, more tolerant, I would say, of quirks and so forth. Which, again, I'm the guy who actually came up with the ignore all rules rule, so that appeals to me.
So I notice, unlike Wikipedia, that the article about your left thumb is properly sourced as well. We've got a website from your high school and other links, I see. So the idea is here, what Wikipedia does is they decide that, well, that's not important enough to be part of Wikipedia. But no one would say, like, well, Larry's right thumb is much more popular than his left thumb, so we're going to write about his right thumb and cut this out. They wouldn't. There'd be no one to ever say that.
That's true. That is absolutely true. Now, that isn't all. Okay. I'm just telling you. I'm just giving you the news about how Everipedia has set itself up, what its niche has been. up until just the last couple of months.
Yeah, this is a big one. I mean, that's been something. I mean, because I have a Wikipedia page that someone created at some point when I was on Tech TV, the cable TV station, and then I had 3 kids and disappeared for about a decade. And whereas my coworkers' Wikipedia pages were taken down because they weren't seen as important, mine was completely ignored because I was nowhere. And now it's still up there. I also have an Everipedia page. Yes. Which I assume would be easier for me to edit than it is. Well, I've never edited my own Wikipedia page. Is there still that rule? You don't edit your own work?
No, you can edit your own. But I have no doubt if you don't have one on Everipedia right now, of course you do. Yes, because it was borrowed from Wikipedia. Mm-hmm. Yes, you could go in there and update it. And maybe you should.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that after this, if it hasn't gotten lots of attention from people, it very soon will, because that's how the guys in the office are, basically. So we've got a number of people in the office who basically do nothing but write and edit, and then there's a big community in addition of volunteers, and they like respond very positively to any sort of press.
Well, I tried to become an editor, but you can't. Yeah, you have to be chosen.
That's very recent. That's all you have to do right now is to leave a message on the contact form and say, please make me an editor, and give your email address, and they'll add you. But there's technical reasons that have to do with the fact that we are actually moving everything onto the blockchain. Mm. So but it is possible, but we have to do it this way for a few weeks. But that's going to change pretty soon.
So anyone
it'll change back.
So anyone at some point can write anything about anything. What are the other big differences?
Well, I think there's another one that I'll mention before I get into the blockchain stuff, and that is that the guys and gals who are paid or who some of them haven't been paid at all. They've been paid in equity, and that it's their labor of love. They put in hours and hours writing on stuff, and Mahmoud is the leader of this, and I think he and some others are really setting the tone for Everipedia, and it's much more hip, it's much cooler, it's more thug, as they say. I don't understand this new, kids these days. I don't get their jargon, but they are a lot of fun, and they're much more open and tolerant, and it's a younger crowd, and that just makes a big difference. The people that you start. I mean, look at Quora, for example, versus Yahoo Answers. The concept is very, very similar. But Quora decided that they needed to start with a group of people who are like movers and shakers in the tech world and some other fields, and some thoughtful celebrities and whatever. And they got a really interesting set of early adopters, and that has forever after shaped the community, because online communities are self-selecting, right? People will join a community if they like how it looks. They'll stay with the community if they like the people that they interact with there and the policies that they're working under. And if they don't like it, they don't try to change them. They just leave. And so online communities tend to be relatively stable that way. So Wikipedia had one sort of group of people that it ended up with after that first seminal year. And then Everipedia has developed a different sort of zeitgeist, different sort of outlook on how to interact with each other and what's important and what's interesting and what's cool. So.
Okay, so let's get to the blockchain. Most people, they think blockchain, they think Bitcoin. What does that have to do with an encyclopedia? But of course, blockchain, there's many uses for the blockchain. Give us like a little quick and dirty explanation of what blockchain is.
Right. A lot of people don't know what it means, so don't feel bad if you don't. I mean, I only had the roughest notions until about 3 months ago. But the blockchain is essentially a distributed database. You could think what it is it's a ledger, which is just as you would write down in a paper ledger a list of entries. It is a list of publicly posted blocks of data that are connected by cryptographic references, one to the previous, to the previous, to the previous, which means the whole thing cannot be edited. All these things are important, by the way. It sounds very technical and so forth, but they all have deep ramifications. And because it's difficult to understand them individually, that's why people have a hard time understanding the whole. But you really have to study the individual components of the blockchain before you can really get it. But at any rate, because the blocks in the blockchain are all sort of connected together in an uneditable way, that means the jargon is immutable. It cannot be changed. And also, whether a block is added to the blockchain is determined based on a protocol which is shared by a whole bunch of different editors. They're actually called nodes. So these aren't people, actually. I shouldn't call them editors. A whole bunch of different nodes that decide whether it's going to be added. In the case of something like Bitcoin, it's all machine processable. Whether a new block can be added to the blockchain is determined by an algorithm that can be performed by any computer. And then the idea is, if you succeed in successfully putting a new block on the blockchain, you actually get a token or some portion of a token for doing that. Because the blockchain as a whole is actually a measure of value. When it comes to a blockchain encyclopedia, it's actually going to be a decision made by the token holders. So people who have earned tokens or who have purchased tokens, they will actually be deciding whether new blocks are going to be added. Now, the bar is going to be set very low for encyclopedia articles because we want there to be multiple competing articles on different topics. And we don't want the important decisions about like which is the best and so forth to be decided at the blockchain level, right? And just to get back to the blockchain piece, I'm sort of getting into the encyclopedia piece. So the blockchain is actually replicated across all of the different nodes. So it might live on a server in New York City and another one in Los Angeles, one in Tokyo, one in Sydney, one in New Delhi, and one in Tel Aviv, all around the world. And for this reason, it's practically impossible to stop the signal. It's decentralized. That's the other big buzzword.
And that's to prevent censorship in different countries, as Wikipedia is censored in some places.
Well, at least that's the part that we like about it. But it has ramifications as long as we're talking about just blockchain in general. It has ramifications for how a new monetary system could be organized, right? There's no central bank. There's no need for a central bank because it's literally decentralized across the entire world, and it can't be controlled. It's immutable, right? Mm-hmm. The notion of putting content as opposed to a machine mineable financial instruments on the blockchain. The notion of putting content on the blockchain is something that's relatively new. I think the first, or one of the very first that started it just like, was it last year or the year before? Steemit.com, STEEMIT. They basically made a Medium competitor, what I would describe as a competitor for Medium. And they put that on the blockchain. And one of the guys who started that site has started another startup called Block.One, and they are the publishers of something called EOS, and this is absolutely revolutionary if it will work, and we think it will. It will actually put computer processing power on the blockchain. It will actually make computing power distributed, again, also across lots of different nodes and in a decentralized way. And the consequences are profound there. So what we are going to be doing, what we are in the process of doing, I should say, on Everipedia is to put Everipedia's content, which includes all the English language Wikipedia's content, on to an EOS blockchain. We are this close to releasing a white paper, but unlike virtually all new blockchain startups, we aren't just a nice idea with a white paper and a pre-sale and vaporware. It doesn't seem to be called vaporware so much anymore. I don't know why, but it sure exists in great profusion still, right? Especially in the blockchain space. But
well, yeah, blockchain is for sure a buzzword that I'm suspicious unless it's someone like you using the term.
We actually are. We actually have a product already, right? We already have a substantial traction. I don't want to cite numbers to you because I don't have them perfectly memorized. Sorry, guys. It's impressive. Let's put it that way. And we're a top 1,000 website in the United States. So we are not going anywhere, and we're growing. And on top of this, we are building a blockchain, and I'm very excited about that. So in the next phase of development, so the first phase is basically getting all of Everipedia on the blockchain and enabling basically people to start earning tokens by writing Everipedia articles. But the part that I'm actually maybe more excited about as potentially revolutionary as that is the possibility that we will create a single market, as it were, for all kinds of encyclopedia articles hosted anywhere, and that already exist. So the reason that I got involved with Everipedia is, to make a long story short, I actually visited these guys, their office, about 18 months ago, and they were trying to get me involved, and they couldn't really pay me at the time. And it doesn't matter, but we talked about this idea that I had. I actually think I hit on how to improve on Wikipedia. Basically, we need to create a community where anyone can rate any article on a subject, and the order of the articles on a given topic is determined based on votes. And I think that with the right sort of marketing, that such an idea could really capture the attention of a lot of people, and we'd get a lot of people just going to town, rating all of the encyclopedia articles in the world, and if this sort of thing were in place, what that would do is it would enable and motivate people who are put off by the Wikipedia model, or who just aren't like quite good enough to get into other encyclopedias. They will write articles, put them wherever they want, and then we will be able to catalog those articles and to rate them. And there's millions, tens of millions of people who would probably love to be working on an encyclopedia, but there's only like tens of thousands of people working on Wikipedia, and even though it's a top 5 website, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. There should be a lot more people contributing to the world's knowledge. Well, Sam Kazemian, who is now president of Everipedia and the lead blockchain developer, he said to me last September that they were thinking of putting Everipedia on the blockchain. And he explained to me what that meant, and he said, and I agreed after some consideration, that this would be an excellent way, basically, to implement my idea. That now we would actually have a way to rate all of the encyclopedia articles that are out there, and actually a way to publish them so that their authors then actually get some financial compensation. One of the points that my colleagues at Everipedia like to say, and I'm totally on board with this now, is that the people who have put in so many hours writing articles on Wikipedia are not compensated at all in any way, right? They could be. Mm-hmm. Maybe they should be. And so the Everipedia network will provide a way for them to do. And I say network as distinguished from Everipedia.org. Everipedia.org is the website. The Everipedia network will refer to the network of content providers that are contributing to the blockchain that we're developing.
And so where would people create this? And if it's available everywhere and unable to be censored, like if I were in China, how would I be able to write an article? And how would I do that and not be blocked from doing that?
Well, who knows? Maybe eventually Everipedia will scare the Chinese so much that Everipedia 2 will be blocked. I hope not. But even if it is, there will be all kinds of other websites and apps that are plugged in to the blockchain. There won't be any easy way for all of them to be like chopped off, and they can't block the nodes because there's too many of them. They're all over the place. They won't even necessarily be able to identify them, or at least identify them all. And I basically, information will find a way in this case, because again, it's kind of like trying to censor the entire internet. What we are building is a protocol. It's a protocol, not just a website. We are building something that rests on top of the rest of the internet, right? Now, Everipedia, granted, will be the first user, right, of the protocol, but after that, there's going to be a lot more.
Well, I love this idea, especially the idea that researchers would be able to get paid for their work. I think that's really important. I think that's part of what the problem with Wikipedia is. I mean, it's self-selecting. If you're going to be able to put that many hours in, you're retired or you're independently wealthy, and that there's a lot of knowledge that might be missing from people that are just writing about that. So one of the things that I've read that you wrote is that you'll be able to create the best article that the human race can write. But my question about this is best according to whom? Because obviously there are. I know you are talk about bias in articles, because I know that's a big issue with Wikipedia, and I know that you guys have thought of this. I'm not the first one to bring this up to you, but how do you handle bias in these encyclopedia articles?
This isn't written into the white paper yet, but in later versions, I believe it will, and it's certainly my vision for the Everipedia network. The following: imagine not just putting encyclopedia articles and edits of them on the blockchain, but also putting information about the users, about the people who have made the contributions, and also about the people who have made ratings. So we could put ratings of articles on the blockchain, and we can put information about the people who have done the rating. All right. And then imagine that we also have put up self-reported information about the users. So I could say that I have a PhD in philosophy, and that I'm like a white male, and then I'm so-and-so old, and I live in such a place, and other people do the same. And you can imagine there would be tags then, and also in addition to that, then we'd also be able to rate each other based on how much we agree with a person's self-description, right? Like, I am an expert in physics. Do you agree 1 to 5 or whatever? I don't know what precisely what it'll look like. This way, you can imagine that there would be a set of vetted experts on a subject according to other people who have been designated as experts. And in addition, another piece of metadata that I want to include on the blockchain is information about membership in professional associations. So if the American Psychological Association wants to publish its membership list, a list of email addresses or IDs or whatever form it would have to take to the blockchain, then they would be able to do that. And then the people who are making apps based on the blockchain would then be able to use that. And then they would be able to say that according to actual psychologists, this article about, antisocial personality disorder is the top article. Or according to people who have a bachelor's degree in the subject, or according to women, or according to Democratic Party voters, or philosophers, or who knows, that the sky's the limit.
And so that would be one click away. If I just wanted to see what women thought of your left thumb, I could click on that.
Right. I hope so. It actually depend on the people, how people use the information, right? Because what I'm describing is just a data format. I'm just describing a protocol that people would use to publish the information to a neutral, decentralized source, and then how people actually make use of it, what sort of tools they use. Like, I'll give you an example. I think Conservapedia really sucks. Conservapedia it has not done the best job at trying to represent the conservative point of view in a credible, well-researched fashion, because it's just far too biased, basically. Now, it's not surprising to me that it's been written the way that it has, because it has a certain a certain group of people who have controlled it, and that's basically what they wanted to produce. But what if instead of that, we had just the ability to label yourself as conservative, all right? And then imagine that there were people who were both conservatives and college graduates, or whatever you wanted to do, or whatever you wanted to say. And imagine that all of those, there were like millions of people who had that description, who had made ratings of articles, right? Then you would find the best articles according to people who are actually reasonably serious, right? Who maybe had higher standards than the people at Conservapedia. And of course, I'm just picking on conservatives because, you know, they're the first ones that came to mind. There's all kinds of left-wing wikis out there as well, and I'm sure they suck as well. And I think we could do a lot better, right? And so what I want to do is raise the bar for biased information on every side. And then here's the really cool thing: you can actually give an operational definition of neutrality and based on basically weightings of different points of view. All right.
Right. So it's a solution to our filter bubbles as well. Like we're all, you know, we've created these places for ourselves where it's an echo chamber. Everybody's exactly like me. But if you have the differing opinions, you can get rid of that. Yes.
At least that's what I'm proposing. And I'm really excited about this idea. I think it's an idea whose time has come. Basically, we don't have any way at all. Humanity has no way of aggregating our opinions so that we can actually discover what experts actually believe or what they approve of or whatever. This is going to. This could be one of the greatest experiments in history, frankly, if we do this. Because just imagine if you had ratings of every single encyclopedia article online, and such that if there weren't any really good article on a subject, then anybody else could write an article, and then you'd have a chance of actually being the top-rated article. All of knowledge will be represented because there will be one place that you can go to find it, the Everipedia network, basically. It's not one place, though. It's the knowledge marketplace for mankind, or humankind, right? And then if there isn't any good article according to, you know, French feminists, or for then you can easily imagine how the French feminists are going to step up to the plate and write one that they can rate highly, right? The consequences for how we will understand each other, the resources that we have for understanding each other and understanding other points of view, are practically incalculable. I can't imagine what the world will be like if this thing is built.
Well, it has been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for the time. I'm so excited. I'm going to try to get my editor status at Everipedia. I'm going to keep following you on Twitter to watch it unfold as you move to the blockchain. Dr. Larry Sanger, co-founder of Wikipedia and now the CIO of Everipedia. You can find out more information at larrysanger.org and Everipedia.org. That's Everipedia.org. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Take care.
You too.
And thank you for joining us on Triangulation. Like I said, definitely check out Everipedia.org because this is a really exciting possibility of people being able to catalog the world's knowledge, the whole world working together in a place that's not able to be censored, I can't wait to see what happens with them. And thank you for joining us on Triangulation. Triangulation records every Friday at 3 p.m. Pacific. You can watch live at twit.tv/live, and you can watch on your own time. Just download. You can subscribe with whatever podcast catcher. You can listen, you can watch, you can listen and watch. You can just watch and not listen, but there's no reason to do that. Don't do that. You can find all the ways to do that at twit.tv/try. I am Megan Morrone. I'm at Megan Morrone on Twitter. We'll see you soon.